Good afternoon, everyone. My name is McGregor Scott. I'm the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of California. I'm joined here at the podium today from my far left, Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Drug Enforcement Agency for our region, Jerry Miller. Next is the Assistant Special Agent in charge for our region for the ATF, Bryce McCracken. Next is Yolo County Assistant Chief Deputy District Attorney Melinda Aiello. To my right behind me is District Attorney Krishna Abrams of Solano County. Next is Assistant Special Agent in charge for the FBI, Jonathan Snow. Next is, everyone knows, Anne Marie Schubert, the elected District Attorney of Sacramento County. And last but certainly not least is Sacramento Police Chief Daniel Hahn. And I thank all of you for being here with us today. During the administration of President George W. Bush, the Justice Department launched Project Safe Neighborhoods, an initiative that set out a goal and a plan for federal law enforcement to reach out to our local and state partners to reduce violent crime in our communities. 1 year ago this week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced the relaunching of Project Safe Neighborhoods with the tech-savvy nickname Project Safe Neighborhoods 2.0. We are here today to report on our 1 year progress on working deliberately and proactively with our state and local partners to reduce violent crime in the Eastern District of California. We have been working very hard with our partners to accomplish this goal, and we have some good news and some good reports to provide to you today. Project Safe Neighborhoods is classically a program in which the federal U.S. Attorney's Office will take for federal prosecution, typically, felons with gun cases and dope cases targeting gangs and other violent criminals. It can take very specific forms in how we actually implement the program. First, we have very successfully undertaken a number of major gang sweeps here in the Eastern District of California. Bakersfield, multiple ones in Fresno, and earlier this year, Operation Silent Night, which was based out of Yolo County, led by the FBI, the HSI, ATF, and DEA, working collaboratively with local law enforcement, where we targeted the VBN gang based out of Woodland, which had tentacles spreading all over the northern part of the state up to the state prisons in Del Norte County. And in that operation, we worked collaboratively with the Yolo County District Attorney's Office. We took 25 persons for federal prosecution, and the DA's office took 10. So that's one form of Project Safe Neighborhoods. The second is a large-scale operation that's been undertaken by the ATF to engage in undercover purchases of illegal firearms that are openly and widely being sold on the streets of our communities in the Eastern District of California. As one example, in February of 2018, this office indicted 3 Stockton residents with unlawful dealing in firearms, and because they sold 50 firearms, including machine guns, stolen firearms, and ghost guns to undercover ATF agents and their agents working with them. By way of example, on the table to my left, we have a couple of ghost guns, and ASAC McCracken from the ATF will be available to answer any questions or walk you through that. All I want to point out there is that these guns are made in people's garages, and they're being sold. And oftentimes we find that it is felons who are selling these guns, and we are doing all we can through these operations to get these illegal firearms off the streets in cities like Stockton and Sacramento. Third, one of the things that we undertook earlier this year was the selection of the 6 largest counties by population in the district. That would be Kern, Fresno, Stanislaus, San Joaquin, Sacramento, and Solano, to dedicate 2 assistant United States attorneys to each of those counties to work collaboratively with the district attorney's offices. We've added Redding so that we have a presence in the north part of the district for a total of 7, where we have, and they're all up and running at this point, we have weekly meetings with the deputy district attorneys and the assistant United States attorneys to review the gun cases and the violent crime cases that have come in, where they sit down and literally do an assessment. What's this guy's criminal record? How big of a threat does he pose to the community? And who can get the most sentence in trying to decide where should that case go for prosecution. I couldn't be happier about the partnerships that we've stood up with the Sacramento DA's office, the Solano DA's office, the San Joaquin County DA's office here in the northern part of the district, in these literally weekly or bi-weekly meetings. And in fact, just this morning, we call it the blue collar team because it's blue collar crime, guns and drugs. We had 2 lawyers in Fairfield meeting with representatives of the Solano DA's office. We had 2 representatives here in Sacramento meeting with representatives of the Sacramento DA's office, and we had 2 representatives in Stockton meeting with representatives of the San Joaquin DA's office, doing exactly what I just described. Who is this guy? What's his history? What's his threat level? Who can get the most time? Classically in the felon with a gun case. And I want to give you an example of the type of case that comes out of those types of meetings. And this is one that arose out of San Joaquin County. Cammie Desmond, our prosecutor on the case, is here in the room today. Earlier this year, Stockton Police Department officers made a traffic stop on a car that had 2 occupants. One of them had 4 prior felony convictions, the other had 5. After the car came to a stop, they each ran. One was armed with a fully automatic Ghost Gun AR-15 with a laser sight and a high-capacity magazine. The other had a stolen Glock handgun, which had a laser sight and a high-capacity magazine. They both pointed their weapons at the officers during the pursuit and ultimately resisted arrest. They finally were taken into custody and booked at the San Joaquin County Jail. Working through the process I just described with the DA's office, Ms. Desmond was able to sit down and say, you know what, we in the federal system can get a longer sentence. Let us take these 2 guys, and we are presently prosecuting them. So those are the 3 classic forms: gang sweeps, ATF undercover buys, working directly with the DAs to do a threat assessment on individual defendants based on who can get the best sentence. A question I often get is, why federal prosecution? Why can't the locals do this? And in large measure, I've classically had 3 answers to that question. In recent times, I've added a 4th. The first is that in the types of cases we're talking about today, felons with guns, dope cases, we can get longer sentences in the federal system than they can get in the state system. In addition to that, the defendants will serve a higher percentage, typically 85% of the sentence that's handed down by the judge, as opposed to 50% in the state system. The third traditional reason I've given, and this applies particularly in the gang context, is that rather than going to Folsom to do their time, they're going to Leavenworth to do their time. And that breaks that connection, that bond among the gang members, and it serves very effectively to sever those connections. The 4th reason that I have added in recent time is that there is no longer such a thing as truth in sentencing for a large extent in the California state criminal justice system. And let me give you an example of that. In a case out of Solano County, a defendant with 6 prior felony convictions was convicted by the Solano County DA's office of assault with a firearm on a peace officer and was sentenced to 6 years in state prison for that crime. He was released on parole 1 year later. And within a few months after that, he was back on the streets and found in possession of a gun. So we took that case for prosecution, and we gained a conviction, and he has been sentenced. But the concept that when a judge in state court hands down a set sentence, that a defendant is going to serve a set number of days around that sentence does not exist to a large extent in the California state system. So what we bring is certainty. We know how many days, we know what the percentage is going to be, and we know how long the person's actually going to be physically in custody. We do this, obviously, in consultation with the DAs as we prosecute these cases. So, what have we accomplished in the last year with Project Safe Neighborhoods, working with our partners? The Eastern District of California has indicted a total of 210 individuals under the umbrella of Project Safe Neighborhoods. There's a variety of different types of charges that are being brought, but the grand total is 210. Specifically, I would call out that we've indicted 22 persons from Sacramento County, 21 from San Joaquin, and 15 from Solano. On a national level, we need to step back for a second. In 2015 and 2016, there was a severe increase in the violent crime rate on a national level. And when the Sessions Justice Department came in early 2017, one of the goals that was set was to reverse this increase in violent crime. For 2017, there was in fact a 1% decrease in violent crime nationwide. And even more compelling, for the first 6 months of 2018, for the 60 major cities in the nation, which include Sacramento and Fresno, violent crime is down 5%. Now, I'm not here to tell you that PSN deserves all the credit for that decrease, but it certainly is a factor, because we're taking those who truly deserve it and putting them in federal penitentiaries where they're going to serve longer sentences for a greater percentage of their time in prisons all over the country. And all that does is help our local partners to protect their communities from those who would do their fellow citizens ill. I'd now like to turn the podium over to District Attorney Schubert.
Good morning. There can be little doubt that gun violence is at oftentimes an epidemic proportion, not only in this state, as well as this country. Anyone can easily search Google and find study after study after study to support the rampant effects of gun violence. One only needs to read local stories here in our local newspaper or on television about real-life impact of gun violence that it has on the communities that we serve. Just a few weeks ago here in Sacramento, a 3-year-old child was shot and killed in Sacramento when violent criminals shot up her house. As public safety leaders, it's our responsibility to work together to combat this epidemic of gun violence, to reduce victimization, to enhance public safety, and to make our communities safer. We combat that epidemic by working together, by targeting the most dangerous and the most violent criminals. We combat that by finding the strictest laws that we can have and to use those tools as prosecutors to make our communities safer. I am incredibly proud of the partnership that the DA's office here in Sacramento has with the U.S. Attorney's Office, with our local law enforcement partners, through Project Safe Neighborhoods to remove these violent criminals from our communities. One only needs to look at a few case examples from Sacramento to understand not only why Project Safe Neighborhoods is needed to protect our community, but to also understand why it's working. There's an individual that came out of Sacramento by the name of John Trotter. It's important to understand why we sent that case to Project Safe Neighborhoods. It's important to understand his record. And here, if you haven't been given a handout, we've provided one. In 2000, John Trotter violently beat his girlfriend while she held her 8-month-old child. He was convicted of felony domestic violence, which under California law is not a violent crime. He continued on with his crimes, going in and out of jail for theft and drug crimes, which are now for the most part misdemeanors under Prop 47. In 2005, now 14 years ago, he ultimately landed in state prison after committing more felonies. Despite his 3-year sentence in 2005, he was released in 2006. Within months of that release, he was arrested again for more drugs and again sent back to prison. Within a few years of that release, Trotter was again arrested, this time for felony residential burglary, when he tried to break into the home of a young female. Back again to prison, released in short order, only to be rearrested again and again for more drugs. He finally went back to prison for possession for sale of methamphetamine. And within days of being released from yet another arrest, he was caught in possession of a sawed-off shotgun as well as ammunition. He was again sent back to prison, California prison, this time as what we call a second striker, for 32 months in state prison. Under Prop 57 and the early release plans of the governor, he was considered a, quote, non-violent offender. felon in possession of a sawed-off shotgun is a non-violent offense under California law. Despite my office vigorous opposition to his early release, including a letter, which you all should have, saying that this individual is dangerous, that he is violent, they granted early release. We appealed, saying no, he's too dangerous. But instead, they said no, he's not, and they granted early release, saying he was not a public safety risk. A few months after they released him, he got into a high-speed chase with law enforcement through a residential neighborhood, lost control of his car, and crashed. He took off running, was found with a black pouch, with a loaded .380 caliber handgun, 30 grams of methamphetamine, a digital scale, and over $1,300 of cash. Why did we send Mr. Trotter's case to Project Safe Neighborhoods? Because John Trotter is a violent and dangerous individual who should never have been released early. And we can be assured that now that he's pled guilty in the federal system, he won't be getting out in months, but in years. Second example of which the case goes on, is Jonathan Darling, a validated gang member with a history of firearm crimes and shootings. He was stopped by SAC PD near a middle school not far from here. When stopped, he bailed out and tossed a loaded 9mm handgun. We chose to send that case to Project Safe Neighborhoods because we knew that the U.S. Attorney had the ability to sentence Darling, this dangerous gang member, to more time. We all know that here in California, despite his record of being a felon in possession of firearms, that he's considered a nonviolent offender and is eligible for early release. As I said, these examples go on and on. We are proud to work with the U.S. Attorney's Office and all our law enforcement partners to make sure that those 4 key things that U.S. Attorney McGregor Scott said are served, which is amount of time, that he's not released early, that he's out of the system, and that our communities are safer. So I look forward to this continued collaboration and continuing to take more of these dangerous individuals off the streets of Sacramento.
District Attorney Abrams.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As a prosecutor, my #1 priority is public safety. The men and the women and the children of my community deserve to be safe in their homes, at school, on the streets, and in the workplace. But unfortunately, too often, we have senseless acts of violence that are killing our men, women, and children, and these innocent lives are lost forever. Their loved ones, whose lives have been destroyed by violence, are angry, they're sad, they're frustrated, they're filled with grief, and they have long-lasting questions that often us prosecutors cannot answer. As a homicide prosecutor for several years, I saw too many families that had to walk this painful journey of losing someone that they loved. There's really nothing you can say or do for them to take their pain and make it go away. You can just promise them that you will do your job. But at the end of the day, whatever we do, we can't bring back their loved one. We can only seek and do justice in their case. So as members of law enforcement and the public safety community, we look constantly at how we can try to prevent these senseless acts of violence in our community before we actually have to prosecute these cases. So when U.S. Attorney McGregor Scott reached out to me earlier this year and told me about Safe Project Neighborhood 2.0, I was ready to get on board with him. And so that partnership that we've had, especially over the last few months, a team lead of my office, Haroon Khan, meets with assistant U.S. attorneys every single week, and they go over those cases and try to determine where the case should be prosecuted, whether at the state level or at the federal level. And we focus on trying to reduce the violence in our community by focusing on illegal and stolen firearms that get in the hands of convicted felons and gang members, those who've been released in our California on post-release community supervision by the governor and parole. And it is in our partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office that we continue to try to reduce this violence in our community. And we believe that a lot of times, like the U.S. Attorney said, that we can get longer sentences in the federal system, and those are the appropriate sentences for the most violent offenders in our community. So our goal is to make our streets in Solano County safer for everybody who comes to our county, who lives there, who works there, and we will continue to be proactive and aggressively prosecute anyone who seeks to commit violent crime in our community. So we appreciate this collaboration between our office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, our local law enforcement, and obviously our federal law enforcement partners. And through this partnership, we will continue to strive to make our community both stronger and safer.
Chief On?
Good morning. I wish I could say that firearms like you see over here on the table, or other illegal firearms, or firearms that are illegally possessed by individuals, or just violent individuals in our community that possess firearms and do violence with them, was unusual. But it's a frequent, on a frequent and regular basis, our officers in our community on a regular basis deal with guns like this, confiscate guns like this. So I appreciate the collaborative approach of Project Safe Neighborhoods in the ability to keep these firearms off our street and violent individuals that utilize them. We often talk about a collaborative approach to everything we do as being necessary, like intervention and prevention, but the enforcement side is just as important that we do collaboratively to ensure that these sort of firearms in the hands of people that would do violence in our community are lessened through the Project Safe Neighborhood. These don't just cause damage to the victims that they strike, but they cause damage to the entire communities where they happen at. And so I appreciate Mr. McGregor Scott and all of our partners in helping keep our communities safe from the violence that these sort of firearms inflict on our community. Thank you.
Thanks. I think we'd be prepared to take your questions. Sam?
Correct. The 210 cases you're talking about, not all of those came because DAs came to you and said, take this over.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, there are a number of federal investigations that launched that fall under the Project Safe Neighborhoods umbrella, but it's that additional piece of it where we're working collaboratively with the DAs, where the cases are brought to them by the local police department or sheriff's department, and many times they've already filed charges against the defendant. Then we sit down and we do the threat assessment, and the decision is made to transfer that person for a federal prosecution. But it's that additional component of it that really gets us to where we are today.
So this is an end run around state sentencing laws.
I think it's a practical solution to state sentencing laws. Bob?
As you're sitting around discussing the threat assessment, where is the line between drug addict who might, benefit from programs in prison or jail or wherever, and drug addict / hardened criminal who's a serious threat to the community? I mean, how do you make that determination?
There is no one bright line on that, Bob, but our focus is clearly on those who pose a threat to the community. There is no shortage of second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth opportunities for those persons who are drug addicts only and are committing crimes in the state system today. Our focus on those is on those who have multiple convictions, often involving violent crime. They've been recently released on parole or PRCS. They've been given the second, third, fourth opportunity, and they've chosen not to avail themselves of it. At some point, a decision has to be made. It is our responsibility at some point to make a decision that this person poses a threat, and we are required to remove that threat from the community, and that takes priority over another opportunity at rehabilitation.
It's probably a dumb question, but those are the kinds I like to ask most. Which is what?
You're really good at it, Bob.
Thank you. How does, I guess, is there a jurisdictional thing? Is there a waiver that's required in order for it to go from a
Yep.
local or state prosecution
So-
to a federal?
Right, so the concept is that there has to be an interstate nexus for a case to be brought in the federal courts. Almost without exception, every handgun that is possessed in the state of California was manufactured somewhere else. We don't have, but I'm unaware of, I think maybe one gun manufacturing plant in the state. So the guns, they cross state lines in coming to California. So that provides the interstate nexus, which gives us federal jurisdiction. Guns like these are illegal from the outset under the federal laws, so we don't have that interstate nexus necessarily.
Aren't these legal as long as you don't transfer them?
You can have one. If you have 50, you've got a problem.
So how many have you seized? How many has the ATF gotten in the past year?
Last press conference we did, I think, in the Eastern District of California, our offices had seized 930 firearms. A large majority of them are ghost guns, and a handful of commercially manufactured firearms as well.
That's in the last year?
Last 2 years, I believe, was the last press conference.
We can get that for you, Sam. I don't have that stat right off the top of my head, but we can get that for you. Anything else?
There was a mention of, I think it was Solano County, the, paroled 1 year later back and found the gun. Was that the one that's mentioned in the sheet where he shot under a vehicle? Andrews?
Yes, yes, that's Andrews.
Do we have a first name for him?
I can get that for you, Bob. I don't have it right here available.
And that other case was John Darling?
Jonathan Darby for second.
Say that
And
again.
John
Sam.
Trotter.
Darling, D-A-R-L.
Any other questions? Anybody? Good? Okay, well, thank you all very much. Appreciate you being here. Thanks.